Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another amazing episode of Breaking Barriers Now. I am so just grateful that's all I can say right now. I'm truly grateful at just the amazing people that have been able to come on here. And today, my guest is definitely going to top the charts. I already know because just in talking with her and seeing what she's already doing, like, oh my goodness, I can't wait. So my guest today is Tasha Wilson, and she's up in Maryland in the United States. And she has a story that she's going to kind of tell us a little bit about today of how she kind of got through her trauma and now she's able to help other women heal through theirs. So, can you guys tell there's going to be a lot of alignment here? Tasha, thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate your willingness to come on here and, just tell your story. I think that this is going to be the best way that we can help more people is just by sharing our own stories and allowing other people that might not be able to find their voice just yet, letting them know that, hey, you're not alone. And there's other people that have had to walk this walk. So thanks again for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. I love it. I love everything that your podcast represents, and I love just being able to be a reinforcing voice for others who may be at a moment where they feel stuck. So I'm
Yeah.
excited.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's get into a little bit of the backstory because we all have that backstory, right? Yes.
Yes.
So I'd love for you to just kind of go into, maybe a little bit of your upbringing if you can, and just kind of take us through a little bit of how you went from where you started to where you are now, if you don't mind.
Sure. So I grew up on the eastern shore of Maryland, Talbot County to be exact, with my mom, my dad, my older brother. And to be quite honest, I was a child who was very reserved, very quiet, always played it safe. I say that because it eventually showed up as an adult, of always playing it safe. And
Mm-hmm.
so for me, having an older brother, he was just kind of like my protector, like from the very beginning. So I didn't have to say much. He would say things for
Mm,
me, and it was just one of those things where he knew how to get us out of trouble if we were, doing things children
that's
shouldn't
awesome.
do. So, like him and I have always been very extremely close.
Mm,
We sometimes have this vibe where people would say we operate like twins. Like we know if something's wrong with the other or if one's feeling sick, it's just always that way.
yeah.
We always have to make sure that we communicate with each other, even now. And so uh, I would say things seemed pretty, content, for us until the age of 16.
Mm,
When I turned 16, my father had suddenly passed away from a work related incident.
mm,
And so for us as a family, it was something that was so major. Like it showed up on the front page of the paper. News reporters were trying to come to the house. Like just
oh my
imagine a
goodness.
Lifetime movie scene and you see a detective coming with the cars and you just already know what's happening. And
Right.
so for us, that was a monumental moment because we just didn't know what to do. So for my mom, that was her high school sweetheart. So everything she experienced life with was with him. My brother, of course, he's looking at my dad because my brother is 21 at the time. So it's just kind of like, all right, he's learning how to enter into manhood. And then for me, I'm just at the unconventional age of 16 where I'm still trying to figure out who I am, what do I want out of life? Do I have
Right.
a voice? How do I find it? Those kind of things. And so dealing with all of that transition at one time was a lot. For me, I actually heard the sound of the explosion, but I didn't know what it
Mm,
was.
wow.
I just heard this loud boom, and I'm like, okay, not knowing that was the moment that my dad took his last breath. And so that followed me as I finished high school and started preparing for college. I actually became diagnosed with PTSD because of it,
Mm,
because the lingering sound reminded me of everything in sight. So thunderstorms just didn't work
Mm.
well.
Right.
It was just a flashback, a trigger of the explosion. Always being anxious, dealing with separation anxiety was really hard.
Yeah.
And so for me, not knowing the language for that at that age, it was just kind of like, this is what they're noticing. You
Right.
know, like I always have to hear my mom's voice to make sure she's okay, because in my mind, I didn't have that closure with my dad.
Right.
You know, it was kind of like he left early in the morning before I got up to go to school. And then it was kind of like, will I forget her voice if
Mm.
something happens to her? Because that was the thought that I was having with my dad. So
Wow.
after that, I said, I'm just going to go to college, even though I was getting good grades. That wasn't the reason why I initially went to college. I wanted
Mm-hmm.
to not be known as the girl who lost her father in the explosion. And so I'm like, I need to go somewhere where no one's not going to really know me or my
Right.
story. I didn't want anyone to kind of judge me based on it, because I had to
Isn't
build up
that
that trust.
interesting how we do that at that age? I definitely can relate to that. Where like I went to
Yeah.
college, I went somewhere new because I was like, nobody's gonna know what,
Mm-hmm.
the backstory if I go over here. But
Right.
we know,
We
right?
know.
Like,
It's in
do
the
you,
back of
so
our
what?
minds.
I just want to ask you real quick because I was thinking about this. What was your dad's? What was he doing? Like, where was he working at the time?
Yeah, so he worked at this place, and it's interesting. It's called Orion Safety Products. That was the
Okay.
name of the place. It's no longer in existence. And
Mm.
he actually was covering a shift for one of his colleagues. And the colleague went on vacation. And so during that time span, because my dad was like the most experienced, they were like, hey, why don't you fill in for this person in doing this? And so this actually was the last day that he would have had to cover that shift.
Oh wow.
I remember the night before, he was just like, I'm glad this is the last day. I'm ready to go back to my normalcy of
Mm.
my routine, and then for this to happen. And so
Wow.
the machine was actually faulty. The machine, it was one of those things where, you know how you kind of put a Band-Aid on something and then you just
Mm-hmm.
expect it to get back to
Mm-hmm.
its natural state.
Oh
It
yes.
was one of those like, oh, okay, well, if we do this, it'll be fine, but not knowing that after a while, the wear and tear, that eventually it was going to bust. And so that's what
Wow.
happened. He was the only person in the room. And so he
Mm.
was the only person that was the fatal one there.
Wow.
So,
So
and
you get through that, you get through high school,
mhm.
which I can't even imagine. So where did you go to college?
So I went to the University of Maryland Eastern Shore,
Okay.
and that was a college that uh, it was mentioned, you know, in high school, but not really. It was one of those because
Mm.
it was kind of like to itself a little bit. So even though it was on the Eastern Shore, a lot of people didn't kind of really go there. And so for me, it was like a way to hide.
I was
So
just
I'm
gonna
like,
ask that. Is
okay,
that why you
you
went
know,
there?
yeah, it
Yes.
was a way to
Yes.
hide, you know? And so I'm like, all right, a lot of people aren't really gonna come here. Like typically they would go to like Salisbury University, which is like down the
Mm-hmm.
street, but people would kind of forget about the value and essence of, you know, UMES for short is what we called it. And so
Mm.
thought I was doing well hiding. And then at the age of 18, I was sexually assaulted. Imagine that.
Mm. I
So
just got
I'm
chills
like,
when you said that. Yeah.
perpetuated trauma, you know, not resolving what I brought in with me, and then now being faced with that.
Yeah.
So
I can definitely
it was
relate to that.
that moment
Yeah.
where depression creeped in. At that point, I really hated everything about myself. I didn't like what I looked like. I placed blame for everything that happened. Every mirror that existed in my apartment was torn down. I just couldn't even identify who I was anymore.
Mm.
And so I just hit a really low place where I'm like, okay, when I find a glimmer or an ounce of any type of happiness, I'm now hit with pain. And so for me, I thought that I was just damaged goods. I'm like, okay, at this point, is there even anything for me to be optimistic about? Because when I
Yeah.
try to do something new, something else happens. And
Mm-hmm.
so for a while, I carried that weight of guilt, resentment, and everything else. Like on the outside, people thought, I had it
Yeah.
together. On the outside, people thought, oh, she's excelling in these areas and all that. But in the inside, I was hurting,
Yeah.
like really hurting. I allowed myself to be in dead end relationships because I didn't think that I deserved anything better.
Hmm.
There were job opportunities that I initially was interested in, but then I felt like I didn't have anything to give or offer. And then ultimately, I didn't think that I deserved love because I didn't love
Hmm.
myself. So,
Ooh,
yeah.
yeah, that hits home. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Wow.
So,
So how long did you go through all that? Because that it just gets worse and worse, you guys. If you're out there
oh,
listening, like I
yes.
can definitely attest to, and if anybody's been kind of following my journey, these are that pain does not just go away. You just carry
Mm-mm.
it, and then you accumulate more baggage and more baggage and more baggage. And like Tasha and I were talking about before we got on here and started recording, it's like we just she said you put it in a different room. I said yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you
Mm-hmm.
just put it in a different room. You think you're running, you think you're going somewhere new. Oh, no one's gonna know anything, but you know,
Yeah.
you know. So, how long of a journey was that for you?
Oh, goodness. The age of 30 is when I
Mm,
had my aha moment. I had actually got out of a secret relationship, and that's another thing about pain and trauma. When you carry the
hmm.
baggage, you do things that you always say you would never do.
Yeah, I
And
know. Been
so,
there.
so I was in a secret relationship for
Yeah.
3 years. And
Mm,
it was then in that moment, it really made me feel uncomfortable. It's different when you feel like you can control whether you want to be hidden or not. But when somebody
yes.
else dictates that, it becomes a problem.
Right.
So I'm just like started asking, but what is it about me that you're embarrassed by, right? Because at this point, he was aware of my sexual assault. So, I'm kind of like, is this the reason why you don't want anyone to know that you're with me? And it was just always this
Mm,
back and forth, back and forth. But even in that relationship, I knew that I needed to walk away. It wasn't until I had to see everything coming ahead. It was kind of like you're subjecting yourself or you're modifying yourself to make this other person happy, but you're yet still suffering in
yeah.
silence. And so for me, it got to the point once we broke up like a couple months before I even turned 30. And I said, I'm tired. I'm just exhausted of doing the same thing. I'm tired of changing people, but yet getting the same result. I'm tired of, feeling the same way. And I just want something different. And so that's when I realized, I had my come to Jesus moment. And I'm
Yes.
talking to God and I'm like, okay, I'm just at this point in my life that I'm just tired of running from you. I'm tired of
Yeah.
running from myself. It's to the point where I don't have anywhere else to turn. Um,
Yeah.
and, God just said one thing to me, which was trust me. And if you trust me, surrender. And so that
Yes.
was my pivotal moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think I can definitely relate to that too. I ended up on the floor. Like
Yeah,
I got
that's
nothing
where I
left,
was. Yeah.
in my apartment, like not at church, right? Like
No.
you see, and that's why, people talk about it and you see it. And yes, I've gone up to the front in church too, but
Mhm.
that moment was inside of my apartment. No one was there except me and
Exactly.
God.
Yes, and that's how it was for me. It was my
Yeah.
apartment. I lost it. I fell out on the floor, and I was just like, something so simple but yet profound at the same time, because it had to start with the root. And for me, it was that
Yes.
abandonment issue that I had when my dad left.
Yeah.
I felt like I was robbed of
Hmm.
that relationship. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm hitting all these milestones and he's not here. And
Yeah.
God is like, but I am,
Yeah.
and it's like,
Yeah. And that's how I was. My dad left when I was 3. And I was the
mm-hmm,
same way. And my mom remarried, but she remarried to someone who, beat her. He just was not a good
mm-hmm,
person in our
mm-hmm.
lives. And I dealt with that abandonment as well. And, so if anybody's out there listening, if you're dealing with that, please know you're not alone. and
Mm-hmm.
please ask for help, because
Yes.
that's, so what made you get up the courage to finally begin the journey of healing? Because I know personally that is not an easy journey to start.
Oh my
So what
gosh,
made you
no.
finally say, you know what, did you ask for help? Did you go seek help? Like, how did that look for you?
So for me, I became open and transparent. So I told my best friend about everything. Like she knew bits and pieces, of course, that's my best friend. But
Hmm.
once I just kind of laid everything out for her, it made sense. It was kind of like, okay. And then she told me, she said, once you've acknowledged what's going on, then now you can be placed or positioned where you're now held accountable for what's going to
Hmm.
happen after that. And so when
Yeah.
she said that, it hit home because it's
That's
like
a
you
good
have to
best friend.
acknowledge it. Yeah, yeah.
I don't
Yes,
know her, but we gotta meet too. Like,
yes, yes.
she
And
sounds
I'm
pretty
like, you
wise.
are, she is like when people see us, they see one, you see the other. And
Yeah, that's
people look at
awesome.
that, they look at the outside and they're kind of like, oh, you
Hmm.
guys, but I'm like, no, we've been in the mud with each other too, and
Yes.
um I appreciate her saying that because, sometimes we can acknowledge something and then we just kind of go on about our day. But
Yeah.
for that accountability piece, it made me realize I actually have to deal with it. So I put it out
Yes.
here on the table. Now, what am I going to do with it?
Yeah.
Right. And so I went to a support group,
Mm.
especially with the sexual trauma to
Yes.
unpack and navigate that. And for me, it was an awakening moment because for the first time ever, I didn't feel like I was by myself.
Yes.
And that everything I felt with that was normal. And so that made me not feel like, okay, there's something wrong with me.
Right.
Just giving me the space and the grace to really talk about my experience really helped. Not someone
Hmm.
trying to force you to speak up on things you're not ready about,
Right.
but really being patient with me is what really helped me say,
Yeah.
okay, I can get through this. I can deal with this. And when I initially got to the support group, I wasn't talking at all. I just started journaling. So I put a lot of my
Hmm.
thoughts, on paper.
That's what I do.
And
I still do that.
oh yeah, I love journals.
Yes.
And it's just so freeing for me because you feel unrestricted. Like when you write down
Hmm.
everything and you don't have to worry about opinions or,
Hmm.
feedback. You can just say, this is where I'm at right now. I'm owning where I am right now.
Yep.
And then when you see the growth that comes out of it as you continue to journal. So that really helped me. And then when other people started talking about their experience, of course, for me, with dealing with the loss of my dad and the loss of the relationships, like even though they were dead in relationship, I still grieve them because
Hmm.
that's all I
Oh
knew.
my gosh, I just talked about that not too long ago. It's interesting that you said that. I actually just told someone, I think it was last week. No, it was the woman that I ended up spending 6 hours with over the weekend, actually, that I told you about before we started recording on here. But that's one of the things that I told her is even in friendships, when like, that doesn't work out, or, we have to go our separate ways, or what, I have to grieve it like it's a death.
Yeah, you
So
do.
it's
You
interesting
really
that you just
do.
said that, but I never knew that. So I would
Mhm.
always try to cling, and that's that abandonment thing, right? Where it's
Mhm.
like, no, don't leave, don't leave. But that probably wasn't a good person in your life anyway, right?
No.
Yeah. So that's
Yeah.
interesting that you just said that.
Yeah. So learning how to be by myself, relearning who I am. And so for me, that meant that my relationship with God had to become stronger. So when I was dealing with the pain, dealing with the trauma, entertaining people I had no business being with,
Hmm.
God was on the back burner.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize that I was placing God on the back burner
Right.
until I came at a point in my life where I realized everything that I was doing was trying to fill a void that only He could fill. And
Oh,
so,
let's let's not mess over that. I hope everybody heard that. I hope everybody heard that, because that right there is how we end up in depression. It's how we end
mhm,
up stressed out. It's how we end up not operating in our purpose. And unfortunately, it's what leads to a lot of suicide.
it does. It does.
Mm,
Because you feel empty. Yeah.
yes. Yes. That void. Yeah, because he's there at 1 o'clock in the morning, 5 a.m., you know.
Exactly.
I was like, this is the one person I can count on at any time of the day. Why have
Mhm.
I not done this sooner?
Exactly. And that
Like,
was my
oh, you were just
thought.
waiting on me. Okay.
I was just waiting, I've always been here, just waiting, I was waiting for you to be ready,
Yes,
and
yeah.
so that was the thing. And so I was like, I'm ready. And I was just like, I have to deal with this. If I don't face me or deal with me, I'm going to spend the remainder of my 30 years, dealing with the same thing. And I
Right.
got tired of it. And so
Yeah.
I wanted something new because you know how everyone says 30s is the new 20s and all of that kind of stuff. For
Yeah.
me, it really felt that way because I was entering in a new dimension of
Hmm.
remembering who Tasha always has been, outside of these painful experiences. And
Yeah.
so really getting back to, well, who does God say I am? You know, why were these experiences necessary? What am I supposed to do with these experiences? Like asking all of these questions. So it really became an introspective moment for
Hmm.
me. I started becoming intentional with reminding myself that boundaries are okay. It's not a bad
Ooh,
word.
yes. That.
Yeah, and really recognizing that when I place a boundary, I'm now honoring who I am and my worth. And so
Yes.
I had
Wow.
to really get out of that because once you subject yourself to trauma, you can enter into people pleasing a lot. And
Hmm.
so I had
I have
to
a
unlearn
blog
that.
about that. Yes.
I
Yes.
had to unlearn that.
I tell people, I say, I'm an addict. I'm a people
Mm-hmm.
pleasing addict.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
pour in, I habitually would pour into people
Mm-hmm.
and not fill back up. And so I would just
Yes.
pour until I couldn't pour anymore. And I was in
Mm-hmm.
my 40s when I got my
Mm-hmm.
enlightening. So, the fact that you started in your 30s, that's amazing, you know?
Yeah, I'm grateful because a lot of people look at me now and they're just like, kudos to you because, and I said, I think because I was just hit with things so heavy so early that I was drained and I was
Yeah.
exhausted and I just couldn't take it anymore. I didn't have the capacity anymore. And
Right.
so it was time for me to shift. And so once I said, okay, I'm going to be intentional about loving me, the same love I give to other people, the same way I pour into other people,
Yes.
I need to give myself that. I'm deserving of that too. And
Yes.
so, aside from the support group, I also was dealing with a grief counselor to really unpack those things and
Hmm.
really get to the root of why the sound of the explosion was still haunting me present day and really
Yeah.
talk about those things. And for her, she said, because that was the moment your body responded to you no longer having that safe place. Your dad was your covering. And
Right.
so when that happened, your mind automatically knew that something was different. And
Right.
so that was the response. And so it brought me back to, okay, with me going to church and really getting into my word and understanding that even though he was my dad, I placed so much responsibility on him as my dad that I thought that he was the end all be all. And for me, I had to understand that even though the death was such a huge loss, it was a monumental moment for me to awaken and arise the leader in me because I relied heavily on him. It was
Right.
kind of like, oh, I don't have to worry about anything. My dad will take care of it. But it was the moment of that is where I also found me. So I lost him, but I found me in the
Right.
middle of it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Wow. That's powerful. That is powerful. Well, let's talk about Tasha today. Because I
Okay.
looked at your website. You guys should definitely go look at her website. You can tell everybody where to go to find you.
Yeah, so you can find me at www.lifewithtashaw.com. I promise you it'll make you feel like home. One thing about me.
It is nice. I liked it. I was like, ooh, I might have to steal some of it. No, I'm just
Yeah,
kidding. I'm just kidding.
hey, go
No, it's
for it,
beautiful. It is beautiful.
Thank you. I'm just the type of person that I want, whenever you visit my website, it'll give you a piece of who I am. And I am a person that has never met a stranger. It's like I can have a conversation with anyone and I walk away with a new friend. I am the person that I find value in everyone. You know, I want everyone to feel seen. I want everyone to
Yes.
feel heard. And so that's kind of what you get when you go to my website. So
Yeah. That's
the
awesome.
Tasha today is someone who is a champion. She's an overcomer.
Love
She is
it.
someone who really loves the power of her voice and she owns and embraces who she is unapologetically. I love that I am someone who is very empathetic. I used to shun away from that, but I love that I can
Same
feel
here. Yes.
what
Yes.
someone
I
is
didn't
going
like to
through.
feel either. It took me a long time to embrace
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Because sometimes,
Yeah.
so you just said that, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to just kind of, a lot of people don't understand what being an empath is.
They
It's
don't.
difficult. It is difficult because and that's why we have to learn how to fill back up. Because
Hmm.
as an empath, we feel other people's pain and they don't even
Hmm.
have to say anything.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so we have to learn how to release that.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
if we don't learn how to release that, that's when it can cause some issues. And that's when we shun away from it, right? Because we're like,
Hmm.
I can't deal with that. It's hard enough to deal with my own stuff, right? Like,
Exactly. Exactly.
yes.
Exactly.
So
It
keep
is a
going, keep
lot.
going. But I wanted to really kind of talk on that a little bit just because, a lot of people do have that inside of them and they
Hmm.
do shun away from it. But you
Hmm.
guys, you don't have to shun away from it. You can embrace it, but you
Hmm.
definitely have to learn how to heal through your own stuff. So that
Yes.
way you're not getting triggered. You're not getting, that was definitely happened with me too, where I was getting
Hmm.
triggered. People would talk about stuff and it would do a lot to me that I didn't
Yeah.
understand. And so we have to make
Yeah.
sure that we're definitely taking care of ourselves, just like you were saying. That's awesome.
Yeah. And honestly, when you think of it, like the very things that we don't like are the very things that God finds useful. And so,
Exactly.
you
I know.
know,
And we can't even question it anymore. It's just like,
no.
okay, all right. We're just going to go with it. I'm like, wherever you want to lead me, Lord, that's where I'm going today. Like, I'm not going to question it anymore. I'm not going to
Yeah.
just, you got the plan. Yours is better than mine all the time. So we're just going to go with that.
Exactly. And so for me, it really being an empath has also taught me about discipline too.
Yes.
With that, especially, like I said, with boundaries,
Mhm.
making sure that I'm not overextending myself and but making sure that when I am speaking up for myself about that I'm doing it in such a candid, loving way. Because,
Yes.
sometimes when people are in the middle of their stuff, they may not be able to actually hear what you're saying. They may,
Hmm.
take it as something offensive. So I'm very
Yes.
disciplined with how I communicate,
Hmm.
um, how I show up as myself to other people. I think that's very important because to me, character is a huge thing. Like
Hmm.
everything that I'm doing out here publicly and all of that, it's great, but for me, it's character that stands
Yeah.
out the most because I want to make sure that people feel good about themselves when they walk away from
Yeah.
having a conversation with me. I want people to feel like they can pursue whatever it is that their heart's desire is after they have a conversation with me. I want people to understand how genuinely loved they are when they walk
Right.
away from having a conversation with me. And so I feel like the things that God has placed me to do are vehicles to really connect with people and be that
Yes.
messenger of hope that He's always created and wired me to be. And so, um, every opportunity I get, I make sure that I have a conversation with someone. I make sure that I check
Hmm.
in with people, but it's
Yep.
coming from a sincere place,
Yeah.
because a lot of times people, um, only feel that they can experience God in church. But a lot of us are disciples just walking around and we're
Just
being
walking around. Yep.
that connection to them where we're showing that love and
Hmm.
really fostering the community that they may be seeking. So I always make sure that I'm intentional on how I move throughout my day.
Yeah.
And Tasha then was not always reflective as how Tasha is now. And I think for me, it's like in order for me to live a life filled with purpose, and making an impact and being a difference in the world is that I have to make sure that I am intentional for caring for me, loving me, so that way I can be that same thing, that same outlet to everyone else.
Oh my goodness, I love that. That's exactly. Look, we're gonna have to meet in person.
Yes.
We could probably do some workshops together. You know, who knows?
Yes.
But I mean, it's just, and it's amazing too because I pray a lot before these shows, and I pray about the guests and stuff like that, and so that's he's bringing these people into my life at this time, and his timing is always perfect, right?
Hmm.
And it's just very interesting. But I really I appreciate the fact that you're willing to open up about this because I know how hard that can be as someone who
Yes.
is continually working on doing that. And that's, I think we talked a little bit about that earlier too, where people don't see the effort that goes into,
Hmm.
they just see us, right? But they don't
Yeah.
see what we have to do, maybe early in the morning or before we go out. And
Right.
it's that effort that we put into ourselves, not physically, not what we look like, but internally,
Yeah.
and that's what we have to continue to do. But let's transition a little bit into because you're doing a coaching business now, right? And I know you're an author, an entrepreneur,
Yes.
and so let's talk a little bit about how did you even start that?
Oh my goodness. So
In 5 minutes or less. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
right. So that journey, whew, it was one of those where you create your path, you create your plan, and God's like plot twist.
Yeah.
So for me,
Been
I
there.
always,
Yes.
right, I always was like, no, I just want to be a teacher. Like even as a child, I want to be a teacher. I was the one creating lesson plans, all of that. I was even in the classroom. I had got my undergraduate degree and my first master's in education. That's what I just knew I was doing. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
And so for me, but I've always had this longing and this desire to help women, millennial women, like in terms of self-discovery and really
Right.
figuring out who they are and how does that connect with finding your purpose. That was always my thing. Like I would always wonder the why behind people's
Mm-hmm.
decisions. And so God was like, yeah, I want you to teach, but not in a
Not in
traditional
a
classroom
classroom.
sense.
Yes.
Hmm. I
Yes.
need you to be able to teach and really come from a place of your personal experience, but then you can kind of use your degrees as a caveat for that. But it's like, it doesn't help if you're teaching people the fundamentals of counting and letters and shapes and all that. That's a great tool, but if
Mm-hmm.
they're moving through life aimlessly with no direction, who's the one that's going to lead them to finding purpose and significance in their life? And
Exactly.
so that's how the coaching came about. God was
Yes.
like, you have the tools already inside of you. You've lived this. This is nothing that you're just pulling from Google. This
Mm-hmm.
is
Yep.
something that you can totally relate to. And if you
Yes.
show up as your authentic self, you will be able to bring in the people who really need to hear what you have to
Yeah.
say. And so unmasking the inner me is the name of the coaching program, because a lot of times we walk around, hiding behind our experiences, hiding behind the titles that people give us, hide behind the self-made identities we give ourselves. But
Been
really
there.
unmasking those things and kind of getting
Yeah.
to the core and to the root really helps us discover that who we were from the beginning was enough. And so I really like that intimacy part of the coaching business where people already come with what they need, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
just kind of reinforcing it. And that's what I love
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
It's nothing I've done. It's kind of like you
Right.
already had this all
You
along.
already
You just
have it
need
in
the
you.
reminder.
You
Yeah.
just need to be told that it's okay. That's the thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and I talked to you a little bit about the platform I'm using, but that was why I gravitated toward it. That's why I never left it. So I've been working with them
Hmm.
for 2 years now, but it was okay for me to be me. It
Yeah.
finally gave me a safe place, people I could trust. They're now my family. But
Right.
that's the thing. It's like we need that, and I learned that I could talk about what got me into nutrition coaching because it wasn't the greatest story. I learned that I
Hmm.
could talk about what got me into personal training. Oh, the fact that I had 5 surgeries before that, right? Like I learned that I could talk about postpartum depression because my mom passed away 3 months before my daughter was born.
Hmm.
It was just like so much stuff that I learned that I could finally talk about. you know, and like you said, God's plan. I thought I was going to be a doctor. Nope.
Yeah.
You can keep trying. Like literally, I tried everything. Okay,
Yes.
one program didn't work. I tried something else that didn't work. I went into something
Hmm.
that one I actually got through, and he said, "Nope, I'm gonna pull that one out too." But what
Yeah.
the?
I'm telling you, it's kind of like, really? Really? Yeah.
But what that taught me was, I tell people this now. What that taught me was, is I might have been part of the problem at that point,
Hmm.
because what got me into nutrition was helping get my mom off of some of the medications she was on. Had I
Yeah.
gone into traditional healthcare, guess what I would have been
Hmm.
doing? Giving medication.
Oh, yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So
Hmm.
his plan.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. Definitely. Uh, I really don't want to stop talking to you today. But we are going to continue this. Definitely, I want to stay connected with you. I look
Yeah, of
forward to
course.
anything that we can collaborate on, and you know, because I love the fact of what you're doing right now. Um, and is there anything else that you want to share with the audience before we have to wrap this up?
Oh, one thing. So if there's people who are like struggling with like when it comes to identity and relationship status,
Mm-hmm.
because I know that's a big thing. When you come
Yes.
after the whole pandemic situation, and I know again, personal experience, sometimes you just it's okay to be content with where you are and what you have and still desire more. It's not a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
But like my fourth book, it really talks about that, like with the whole relationship status piece, but from more of an educational empowerment standpoint. Because, you know, a lot of times we have self-help relationship books. No, no, thank you. You know, been there,
Yes.
done that. But this is coming from a place of affirming where you are right now. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes, you know, there's always this talk of being single and then marriage, but nobody talks about the in between. And so this book is a resource
Sure.
for that.
Mm, I
So
love that.
you all are not overlooked. Just want to let you know, because I'm there. I'm right there where you are now. So I get it. You're not overlooked at
Yeah.
all.
Oh man, and that's I love that you shared that. And 4 books, congratulations! Like,
Thank
please,
you.
like I got one. I'm like, oh, she got 4. I gotta catch up. I actually started writing for other people too, so there's been that. But
There you go. See, that keeps you busy.
that's and that, you know, we talked about a little bit, the people that we're around, they saw gifts in me that I didn't see. So sometimes it's
Hmm.
the people that we're around. Once we get around the right people, because if we're around the
Yes.
people that we used to allow in our lives, those things are never going to
Hmm.
come out, right? But when we get around the right people, they see gifts in you. That I've been a writer since I was 15. I never thought
See.
anything of it, you know,
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
yeah, so it's amazing what happens when we learn to just let go of our
Yeah.
plans and our strategies and our systems, and we just allow God to take over. And I'm sure you can attest to this. It's not always going to make sense, you guys. It's not.
At all.
It's not.
It
But
makes you
I'm
question all the
sure
time.
yes. But then we have to be careful, because if we start overanalyze, I'm a habitual overanalyzer also. And so I
Yes.
have to be very careful with that, you know, where it's like,
Hmm.
okay, I'm not gonna try to figure this out today, right?
Yeah.
We're just gonna let it go, and you, okay. So that's the
Yeah.
other thing where it's like we just have to be careful with that. But you guys, if you're out there and you have that calling inside of you, and honestly, I think everybody that I talk to, and probably that you talk to, Tasha, you all have a calling. We all have
Hmm.
this calling.
Yeah.
It's just whether or not we're willing to accept it.
Hmm.
And it's scary, and it's going to be, you know, it's going to be hard. Like, you know, we can't, we're not going to sugarcoat it. It's going to be difficult, but find your tribe.
Yeah.
Find your tribe. Find the people who are really going to support you through thick and thin, where you can go off on them and they'll still love you back. You know, like
Hmm.
find those
Yes.
people. That's I literally just posted about that earlier today, where I was just like, your true friends are the ones that never leave your side. Through thick
Absolutely.
and thin, good and bad, ugly, whatever, indifferent.
Hmm.
You know, and maybe you don't talk to each other for a couple days, but you come back together and you're like, ah, you hug it out and we're good, you know. Those are
Exactly.
the people. Mm, I can't say enough about that, because when I finally got those types of people in my life, it was a game changer.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Music game changer. Yeah. So find your tribe. Don't keep fighting it. Don't if you if you have that inside of you, and it's gonna get to a point where you can't operate anymore without, it's just gonna, you're gonna have to do it anyway. So why not
Yeah.
just start doing it now?
Right.
Otherwise you're gonna be miserable, and who wants to be miserable? You know? And that, I mean, I've definitely been there. You've probably been there. And, I know I'm stubborn. I don't know
Yes.
about you, but it took me a long
Very
time.
much so. Very much so.
I'm not ready for this. Like,
Exactly. And then it was one of the, are you sure me? No, no. You know what I mean?
imposter syndrome. Did you have that, or
Yes.
imposter?
Yes.
Oh my
Oh
gosh.
my
That
gosh.
that could be a whole nother podcast, you guys. We won't even go into that today. Tasha, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate you coming on, sharing your story, and just for who you are. Like, I wish I could just come through and hug you.
I know. If you just live next door, we can.
You're not that far though. You're on the East Coast. We're okay.
Yeah.
Like, I'm at the top of Florida.
Yeah.
There's a way to
Look,
get
just
there.
catch a flight and
Maybe we can meet in the middle at some point.
yeah. Yeah. For sure.
Oh man. All right, you guys. Well, this has been another amazing episode of Breaking Barriers Now. You guys go link up with Tasha. You can just tell she is just an amazing soul. She's got 4 books, you guys. So go support her. I mean, I'm all about an author supporting an author, so I'm gonna definitely check those out too. And just keep being the light for other people. And thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much. And thank you just the opportunity. This is amazing. I always told God the moment you give me the green light to share my story, I'm always going to tell it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. Once again, thank you for tuning in to another episode of Breaking Barriers Now. You guys go subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jody Watkins Inspires. Go follow the podcast, Breaking Barriers Now. Make sure you subscribe so that way you get all the updates. And I just can't wait to link up with you a lot more in the future. So more to come, you guys. Stay tuned.